Working nights at a grocery store seemed normal, until I saw the strange rules they left behind. I saw a job posting about 2 weeks ago, a night guard position at West Market in redacted, Pennsylvania. The hours were from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., paying $21 an hour. The whole thing struck me as odd from the start. What kind of grocery store needed a security guard overnight while it was closed? Was the crime really that bad here? But I desperately needed the money. So 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I understood why they needed a guard. The grocery store was on the edge of a rundown strip mall. Big signs that read space for rent hung in the store windows, but the dusty glass and flickering streetlights made it clear no one had rented them in years. I parked by the front door, and as I walked up, a woman hurried away from the store. "You must be Aaron," she said breathlessly. "The night guard?" "Yeah, that's me. Clive left you some instructions." I put them on the conveyor belt at Register 1. She gave me a quick nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the lot. "Oh, thanks." I called after her. "What's your name?" But she was already diving into her car. The door slammed. She peeled out of the parking space, and then she was gone. So much for making a new friend. I turned back to the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest streetlight flickered with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the asphalt. "Well, here goes nothing," I muttered, stepping up to the doors. They squeaked as they parted from me, and I walked inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I went to Register 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting. I opened it and started to read. "Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. 1. As night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour, making sure nothing is amiss. The rest of your time can be spent in the break room at the back of the store, monitoring the security camera feeds. 2. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. 3. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping carts at the front of the store immediately. 5. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get the mop and bucket, and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not make eye contact with her. 7. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded instrumental jazz disc. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there until it resumes. 8. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive, I stared at the rules, rereading them slowly. They were so strange. A woman in the store? Avoid aisle 7? I had never been given instructions like this, not even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in a bad part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow directions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera staring down at me from the corner. "Okay, challenge accepted." I glanced at my phone. 12:06 a.m. I might as well get my first patrol done now before settling in. It was odd walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. The bread and muffins had been stored away, and opaque plastic had been pulled over the vegetable displays to keep them cold. At the end of the aisle, I turned right into the meat section. Plastic sheets had been pulled over the meat coolers, too, but I could still see flashes of red through the gaps. Huge ribeye and sirloin steaks, big slabs of bone-in meat. I quickly looked away. I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't like the sight of raw meat. I continued on to the aisles. Aisle 3. Pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves, glistening in the fluorescent light. Aisle 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. And then I stopped. Right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor as I passed. Yeah, it was stupid, but on the off chance they were checking the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes later, I found the break room, a plain brown door with a little square window. I made a mental note of its location. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to finish watching Friday the 13th Part 4 on my laptop. I reached the west end of the store, the frozen section. I turned down the aisle, heading back toward the front, and that's when I saw it, a shopping cart parked askew in the middle of the aisle. Of all the rules, this was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be a security guard, not a cleanup crew. Didn't the employees put all the carts away at closing time? Sighing, I started pushing it toward the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly, and the jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading for the front door, and that's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. The hairs on my neck stood up. There's no one in here, I thought. The doors are locked. Unless a customer accidentally stayed past closing. Maybe the woman I saw in the parking lot didn't notice them and locked up before they could get out. Who's there? I called out. A wailing sob came in response. My heart sank. It sounded like a woman, or maybe even a child. I'm coming. I called, breaking into a run. Where are you? They didn't reply. They just kept sobbing. I frantically headed in the direction of the sound, calling out, telling them everything would be okay. But then I stopped. The sound was coming from aisle 7. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. The rules had been very clear about that. I stopped just before the aisle next to an end cap display of mayonnaise. I'm going to help you, I called out. Can you tell me what happened? They finally spoke, but didn't answer my question. Help me, the voice cried, followed by more sobs. Please. I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them, but something stopped me. A gut instinct, a little alarm bell going off in my head. Of all the aisles, what were the chances this person would be in aisle 7? Besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alley in the middle of the night. Come out of the aisle. I called, my voice shaking a little. Then I'll be able to help you. Please help me, the voice replied. This is stupid, I thought. Some person got stuck in here after closing and they're scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home. But another part of my brain, the primal, instinctual part, was screaming at me not to move a muscle. Do you need me to call someone? Your parents? The police? Maybe. Help me, the voice pleaded again. It sounded the same each time they said it, a little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording, or some AI-generated thing looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. Come out of the aisle. Come out and I'll help you. I shouted. The sobs got louder, faster, hysterical. Help me, the voice pleaded again in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there, pressed against the mayonnaise display, listening to the sobs that were making my stomach flip-flop. Even if it did sound slightly unnatural, I could call the police. I had left my phone with my backpack at Register 1, though, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything about walking past the aisle, just that I shouldn't go down it or look down it. And I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help, a child who had sprained their ankle and couldn't get up? Don't worry, I'm getting my phone and calling the police. I called out. I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7 towards Register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped. Just like that. The sobbing, gone in an instant, like a switch had been flipped. And then the footsteps started. Loud, slapping footsteps of somebody running down the aisle, too large to be a child, coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap, I thought. They are coming for me, and I'm probably going to die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard was the soft jazz playing through the speakers. I hightailed it to the break room, completely forgetting about the cart I was supposed to return. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from the inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk, displaying the security camera feeds. I scrolled through them. I quickly noticed that none of the cameras offered coverage of aisle 7. It seemed like they were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything amiss, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30 a.m., time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room, but I also knew that I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I had gone down aisle 7. If I hadn't listened. I pulled myself out of the seat and headed for the door. The store was completely silent. No hysterical sobbing or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol near the back, walking up aisle 17. Cans of food gleamed on the shelves as I passed, but when I glanced at them, I didn't see any recognizable labels. No cans of Chef Boyardee or Jolly Green Giant. Just generically labeled cans of meat stew. In fact, the entire aisle was just meat stew, the same cans, over and over. I reached the end and turned right towards the front of the store, and that's when I realized I had already broken one of the rules. The cart, I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I left it. Instead of being haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, as if some ghostly person had been checking out their groceries. I paused for a second, my hands hovering above the handle. Then I grabbed it and headed for the front door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black, not a single streetlight on. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out. It'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row, and dashed back inside. Then I shut the door and heard the lock click. Okay, that wasn't so bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second, I reveled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside with no one else. But then I stopped. The silence. Oh no, the jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off? I had been so preoccupied with returning the cart that I hadn't even paid attention. I broke into a sprint toward the back of the store, cookies and snacks flashing by me. I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read them again. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anybody flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I had brought, popped it open, and took a sip. I scrolled through the security feed. 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes, I sprinted a lap around the store as quickly as I could. The whole thing only took about a minute, and for the other 29 minutes, I locked myself in that break room. On the second patrol, I heard knocking as I ran down the freezer aisle. It started as a light tapping against the glass and then crescendoed into loud thumps, like somebody was slamming their palms against the doors. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I made it back to the break room. On the last patrol, the music had cut out again, so I quickly detoured and got to the break room as fast as I could, the silence ringing in my ears. And now here I was, in the break room, with 3 hours left. I stared at the clock on my phone, watching it tick slowly toward 3 a.m. I stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I had been a runner in high school, but in the past 10 years, I had gotten way out of shape. The last patrol had left me panting and breathless, my legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out into the store, but I didn't get very far. There was an enormous pool of blood on the floor. I froze, all the air sucked out of my lungs, and stared at the blood shining in the fluorescent lights. The rules said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed, then hurried to the supply closet. I got a mop and a bucket and started cleaning as fast as I could. The job was messy. I slid the mop through the blood, then dunked it in the bucket, rinsed and repeated. The soapy water tinged red. A few times it splashed up and almost landed on me, but I did it. I cleaned it all up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time I was finished, it was 3:27, time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, so I settled for a brisk walk around the store. I headed up through the frozen food section. I noticed now that there were handprints on the glass doors, handprint of all sizes, tilted and smudged. Except the proportions looked all wrong, with fingers that were too long and too thin. I averted my eyes and kept going. 2.5 more hours. My footsteps clicked against the tile floor. The jazz was starting to grate on my nose. I must have heard the same looping saxophone melody 20 times now. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued toward the produce section, walking briskly past the aisles. And then I stopped. Something caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a better look. Someone was standing in aisle 9. A woman. She wore a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back, almost to her waist. She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging limply at her sides. In her hand was a basket filled with cuts of raw meat. The rule echoed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up, as quietly as I possibly could, and then started down the next aisle toward the break room. Click! I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from in front of me. I kept my eyes on the floor, and just as I saw 2 black high-heeled shoes step into the aisle, I stopped dead. Do not make eye contact with her. The words repeated over and over in my head. But I had to get to the break room, and she was standing in my way. All I could see were shiny high-heeled shoes and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in a basket, staining the floor. I backed up. That was the only way I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white calf, keeping time with me. I quickened my pace, and so did she. Click, click, click. I spun around and broke into a sprint. Click, click, click. I ran down a random aisle, sprinting toward the break room. But halfway down the aisle, I stopped. A shopping cart was parked across the middle of the aisle, blocking my path. And not just one cart, several of them, stacked up in a teetering tower that was nearly as tall as the aisle themselves. I was trapped. I backed away, my heart pounding. Click. Slow, methodical footsteps coming towards me, slowly like a cat stalking its prey. I took my chances. I turned around, sprinted back out into the open, and stepped into the next aisle. Oh no, no, and I knew it instantly. A tattered lump of gray clothing and sickly pale blue skin sat on the floor, folded in on itself in a pose reminiscent of a crying child. But it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human, with its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of a head. I had stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move toward me. I whipped around, screaming, and sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left toward the break room. Almost there. I'm almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open, dove inside, and collapsed in the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said that I would be. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No trace of the woman. I switched over to the next feed, the produce section, empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there in front of the break room door. She stood so still that the image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor at the door. My heart slammed into my ribs when I saw her shadow under the door. Go away, I pleaded in my mind. Please just go away. The shadow of her head in the window tilted, as if contemplating her next move. Now I knew why the window had been covered. I forced my eyes away and looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy, black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized they were facing forward, but I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading to her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she had turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just a low frame rate of the crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking, weak. Okay, think. The rules said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I would be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, and then the next, and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. No, her face. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white. No pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back, then shut my eyes. The rule said don't make eye contact. Did that count, though? Through the screen? I let out a terrified, shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands, my entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her rapidly scaling down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling, like some kind of spider. And then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She had left. I was safe. Or as safe as I could be in this cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. time to patrol. I really didn't want to, but I forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she had stalked me. And then, a minute later, I was done. I locked myself in that break room, and for the first time in years, I began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident, though I did hear more sobbing coming from aisle 7 and more banging from the freezers. And then, finally, the hour had come. 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in, disgruntled, groggy employees clutching coffee, heading toward me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car, and got out of there as fast as I could. I had never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I had just gone through. When I pulled onto the main road, I rolled down my windows and flicked on the radio, but it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone, and as I listened to that horrible, looping melody, I realized that my days as a night guard for West Market may not be over yet.